Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for this program of music for harp and viola presented by the Arizona Friends of Chamber Music. I'm Dr. Michelle Gott, Assistant Professor of Harp at the University of Arizona in Tucson, and I'm joined tonight by my wonderful colleague, Dr. Molly Gebrian, Assistant Professor of Viola at the university. We are so deeply grateful to the Arizona Friends of Chamber Music for supporting this new concert format and for bringing us all together tonight. Molly and I have prepared an exciting program, very different works for solo harp and for solo viola. We also have a few surprises for you as well. We begin tonight's musical adventure with a work for solo harp called Awuya by British composer Sally Beamish. Awuya was commissioned by Glasgow University for the retirement of Professor Keith Vickerman, whose daughter Louise is the principal harpist of the Utah Symphony Orchestra. Written in 1998 and revised in 2005, Awuya celebrates the tremendous accomplishments of Professor Vickerman in the field of African sleeping sickness. The composer, Sally Beamish, brings together a unique fusion of scientific ideas and artistic expression, incorporating African drumming rhythms, the pentatonic tuning of a harp used by a Central African tribe, the sound of the tsetse fly expressed through trills, rapid trills on the harp, and a lullaby that was sung by another Central African tribe that was tragically decimated by sleeping sickness in the 1940s. The lullaby, sung to a little girl named Awuya, hauntingly portrays the experience of watching her mother grow sick from the disease. I chose Awuya tonight because I think the themes are very resonant with our current time as we are all facing the reality of COVID-19, but also our hope in scientific advancement to provide new pathways forward, as well as our love of artistic expression and the healing power of music. I hope you enjoy.
I'm Dr. Molly Gebrian, and I'm the new viola professor at the University of Arizona. Thank you so much for joining us today for this concert. All of the pieces we have selected to play for you today reflect this incredibly strange experience we're all going through right now of dealing with a global pandemic. And even though for most of us the overriding feeling is one of anxiety and fear and uncertainty, for me it has also been a time to take a big breath, a time to rest and think and not have to run around a million miles an hour like we normally do in our normal lives. So I wanted to pick something that expressed this. When the quarantine first started here in Tucson, I was also so happy to see how many children and their families were out riding bikes and taking walks and playing in my neighborhood that I hadn't seen before. And so I wanted to capture that too. This first piece I'm going to play for you, entitled For Sydney by Amanda Harburg, perfectly captures these two feelings. So this piece was written for her daughter, Sydney, and is in two movements, lullaby and dance. So the first movement, lullaby, captures that feeling of taking a big breath and just taking a moment to rest. It has a lot of expansiveness in it. The second movement is full of joy and exuberance and captures what I saw in the children in my neighborhood out playing with their families. So even though this is a time of fear and uncertainty and anxiety for many of us, I hope this piece will bring a smile to your face.
For the next segment of our program, Molly and I have chosen to pair two movements from solo sonatas by Paul Hindemith. I will present the third movement from his sonata for harp, which is the only solo work he wrote for my instrument, and Molly will present the second movement from his sonata for solo viola, Opus 31, number 4. Hindemith actually wrote 7 sonatas for viola. Opus 31, number 4 was written in 1923, just a few years after the deadly outbreak of the Spanish flu. The harp sonata was written in 1939, just 2 weeks after the outbreak of the Second World War, and very shortly before Hindemith emigrated to the United States, fleeing the Nazis. Now, while we understandably tend to focus on the music itself, Molly and I found it interesting to pair these two movements at this time in the context of such significant world events. The other aspect linking our choice was that each movement is titled Lied, which refers to a form of German art song that came to prominence in the 19th century. Although the viola sonata is not linked with a specific text, for the harp sonata, Hindemith included the text of a poem at the beginning of the third movement in the print. The text is by German nationalist poet Christoph Holti and describes the wishes of a dying man who wants to have a small harp placed behind the altar of a church. In the text, the children who come to play in the churchyard are attracted. They hear the strings of the harp vibrating like hummingbees, and they see the wreaths that are hung on the altar vibrating of their own accord. It's a magical movement, and we hope you enjoy this pairing.
The next piece I'm going to share with you today, Flow My Tears by Christopher Theophanides, was written in 1997 for one of my former teachers, Carol Rodland. This piece was written in memory of one of Theophanides' mentors, the composer Jacob Druckmann. This is the most personally meaningful piece for me on the program today, and it is full of all sorts of conflicting emotions. There's love and hate and hope and despair, and all of the various stages of grief. Before we hear the full work, I wanted to demonstrate a specific technique for you that I'm asked to do in this piece. So 3 times over the course of the work, the composer asked the violist to play in such a way that mimics an electric guitar, played with distortion. So in order to do this, I have to play very close to the bridge, which we normally don't do. I have to push really hard with my bow, which we never do because it sounds awful. And I have to play with kind of wild vibrato. So it sounds something like this. So you can see it sounds terrible. It sounds like I don't know how to play. But this awful, ugly sound to me is the perfect way to express that feeling of frustrated rage that often accompanies grief. And even though there is ugliness in this piece, like I said, you'll hear this sound 3 different times, there is also unbelievable, almost unbearable beauty in this piece as well. I have performed this piece many times throughout my life, and every time it means something different to me. Working on this piece and performing this piece during this time, I have constantly had at the forefront of my mind the healthcare workers and the protesters who are out there every day fighting to realize a better world. It doesn't really seem right to say, I hope you enjoy a piece that has as many strong and negative emotions as this one does. But I will say that it also has hope and it also has beauty in it. And so my hope is that this piece will give you solace and strength during this time.
I am very excited to introduce the first of two surprises on our program, the premiere of a collaborative project for harp, dance, and video. This project is an example of the interdisciplinary work with which I've been engaged for about 2 years in partnership with Autumn Ekman from the School of Dance and videographer Dorsey Kaufman. Although this particular project was not initially conceived as a digital product, we chose to shift our energies during this time. And so, with joy, I now present the Lyricines project set to music by Japanese composer Takashi Yoshimatsu, choreography and dance performance by Autumn Ekman, and the video mastery of Dorsey Kaufman.
Thank you all so much for being here and listening today. I want to give a huge thank you to Arizona Friends of Chamber Music for this opportunity and also for finding ways to continue to support music and making concerts like this possible in our community. I also want to give a big thank you to Alan and Robert for their help and expertise in audio and video, to Katie for facilitating all of this, and to Michelle for being an absolutely wonderful collaborator. The last piece we'd like to share with you today is called Tanti Ani Prima by Astor Piazzolla. It's also sometimes known as Ave Maria, and it was originally written for oboe and piano, although we think it works pretty well for viola and harp. For me, this piece perfectly captures the feeling of nostalgia that I think a lot of us are feeling for pre-COVID life, but also the understanding that we can't go back to that way of life, at least not anytime soon.
I would also like to express my deepest thanks to Molly for being such an amazing collaborative partner. Thank you to the Arizona Friends of Chamber Music for this wonderful opportunity, to my creative partners Autumn and Dorsey for their work on the Lyricines project, to Wiley Ross from the Fred Fox School of Music for his expertise in audio engineering, which he so graciously shared with me, and also to my partner Alex for his encouragement throughout this recording process. And now, please enjoy the final surprise of tonight's musical program, a work from the 1984 film Henry IV, composed by the masterful Argentinian composer Astor Piazzolla. Although we cannot be with you in person tonight, performing on stage, please consider this our musical hug to you, our community. Thank you so much for joining us, and good night.
Hi,
Hello.
Molly. This is Molly Gebrian. I'm Katie Byerly, and Molly is assistant professor of viola at the Fred Fox School of Music at the University of Arizona. She did her undergraduate training at Oberlin, which
Mhm.
go Obies.
Yay.
Yay! A few years behind me, and then went on to New England Conservatory of Music, and then to Rice University for her doctoral degrees. So I would love to talk to you today a little bit about making music, about your research, but also making music in this sort of isolated environment. So
Right.
maybe why don't we start off with some of your research things that you've been really actively thinking about and learning about lately.
Sure. Yeah. So as you know, I have a background in music and neuroscience. So at Oberlin, I double majored in viola and neuroscience, and I've continued to do both things kind of throughout my education and career. And my main interest in music and neuroscience is applying the research on learning and memory to practicing. And that started because I used to hate to practice. I felt like it was the biggest waste of time ever. But like, teachers always tell you you're supposed to practice. And it was like, well, clearly I'm missing something, right? And so when I started learning more about how the brain learns, then my practicing got better and I enjoyed it more. And so I wanted to bring that information to other musicians because not enjoying practicing is pretty common, I think. And so one of the areas of research I've really gotten into since this whole quarantine thing started is the whole body of research that is called spaced learning, which basically means taking more breaks, like not studying all in one big chunk of like 3 hours or something, but taking a bunch of breaks. And this research goes back to like the late 1800s. So it's been known for a long time that if you space out your practicing or your studying or whatever, you learn more, you learn it better, you learn it faster.
Mhm.
But as a musician and as you know, like the culture is like practice, practice, practice all the time, all the time, all the time, right?
Contest, like how many hours of practice
Yeah.
did you do this week? And you're like, oh, I didn't do as many. Does that mean I'm not as good? Yeah.
Right, that's absolutely right. Like you're made to feel if you're not practicing, there's this, I don't know if you know the group Two Set Violin that they do like spoofs online. They're hilarious. You should check them out. They have this whole thing about practicing 40 hours a day.
Right.
But that is like, that's the culture, right? You're supposed to be practicing like all day, all day, all day. Like taking a day off is like, oh my God, never do that, right? But that goes so against the research. But, I grew up in this culture of you have to practice all the time. And so I was always really afraid to take like a day, 2 days, a week off from practicing something. Like, oh my God. But then this quarantine thing started, all these concerts started getting canceled. And I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to perform anytime soon. I can do an experiment on myself to see how does it work if I take a week off from practicing something. And if it totally backfires and I can't play the piece anymore, like it's fine because I don't have to perform, right? And so I figured out how I was going to do this, and like I covered my practice room with all these like sticky notes that kind of looked like mad scientist in there. And I sort of came up with this experiment to do on myself. And actually the music I am going to be performing in the concert on Wednesday that I recorded for this Arizona Friends of Chamber Music concert, I actually practiced that music as part of my experiment because I could tell. So I started this in, end of March, beginning of April. I could tell that it was working. I was like, whoa, like I'm learning music like way faster and it was just seemed like so much easier to learn than my, normal practice every day for all these hours.
Mhm.
And so when you asked me if I would do this concert, I was like, okay, here's really a test because I am going to have to perform this stuff. Like, is it different when there's that performance pressure? And no, it wasn't. And so I'm really glad I had the opportunity to do this experiment and actually have to perform this stuff because now, like, I'm never going back to my old way of practicing. No way. This way, it's so much better to do it this way.
That's amazing. So as you were learning this music, you would do short periods of practice, maybe in a day or throughout a week, but then did you take a week or two off
I
during?
did. Yeah. So I came up with two pretty different but extremely strict schedules of taking breaks and days off, because I was like, okay, if this is going to be like, it's not scientific because it's only me, right? It's not like I have lots of people, so there's like no control group. But like, if this is going to be even remotely scientific, it has to be strict. Like, it can't just be like, oh, I feel like taking a day off. And so one of the schedules I did was I practiced a like certain section of a piece 3 days in a row. Then I took a day off, and then I practiced it 3 more days in a row. Then I took a week off, practiced it 3 more days in a row. Then I took 2 weeks off, practiced it 2 more days in a row. So that was one schedule. The other schedule was started off practicing it 3 days in a row. Then I took a day off. Then I did it every other day 3 times. So like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Then I did it once a week 3 times. And then I did it once every 2 weeks 3 times. So that one took way longer, right?
Yeah, that's a
like
long period of time.
Yeah.
No planning in that.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So I found that those two, at least for me, they worked pretty much the same in terms of my ability to learn the music, but the first one took way less time. So that's good. And that second way, I'm pretty sure, is how I learned all the music for the Arizona Friends of Chamber Music concert.
That's amazing. Wow, that is so refreshing to hear, I think, because so many of us who play an instrument, whether professionally or just, for fun, it's a lot of us came up in that culture of you have to practice all the time, you have to cram, you have to play through the piece, and nail the whole thing. Don't just practice. And I know for me, it took me until I was really an adult to understand that, like, you aren't supposed to sound good in your practice room. It's not about that. It's not about putting it all together until the very, very end.
Right.
I think that's where, this like neuroscience, and I know like a few years ago, I started reading Noah Kageyama's blog, The Bulletproof Musician. And I know you've done some work with him too, and been on his podcast. And, I just was like, wow, this intersection of neuroscience and psychology and practice and performance is like uncharted territory that all of us, if we could learn from a young age, I feel like our enjoyment of music could be so much greater.
Yeah.
And our ability to learn the music with more ease and less stress could be like so much, it'd just be more fun.
Right. Yeah, totally. And the other thing I found too is like, okay, so I practiced it for 3 days and then I'm taking like a week off. It wasn't that I was taking a week off from practicing totally. I was taking a week off from practicing those particular spots, whatever they may be. And so in that week, like I could practice other music, right? And so like you only have so many hours in the day. You can't practice everything you have to practice in the day, but because I'm taking a break from this one thing, then I have time to practice this other thing, right? And then you don't get bored because you've been practicing the same thing like every day for 5 months or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're not sitting there going, oh my gosh, I still can't get this thing. Right. Like you're just like, I can't believe I'm still here. Yeah.
Right. Well, and the other thing I learned in the research is that there's things that your brain has to do in order for you to get better at something. And the analogy that I've come up with, because it is a little bit complicated, is like road construction. So you can't fix a road when people are driving on it, right? You have to close off a lane of the highway, fix that, and then, open it up for cars. And it's the same thing with your brain. If it's doing whatever it's doing, it can't actually do the construction it needs to do to make it better, just like you can't do road construction to make the road better when people are driving on it. And so actually you have to take breaks for your brain to do the construction it needs to do. And then when you come back to it after the break, the construction's done and it feels like so much easier. It's not that it's in the same place as when you left it, it's better than when you left it.
Yeah.
And it like feels like magic.
That's exciting. That's so nice to like allow our brains to do what they're good at doing, which is like imprinting the information and organizing it so that you can access it later with less effort.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
So cool. So as you're playing with this practice technique and this learning technique, how did you choose the repertoire for this concert? Did it just kind of seem like it fit well, or, was that related at all?
Yeah, so, I mean, it wasn't related to the practicing schedule, but Michelle and I talked a lot because we didn't want it to be just like random pieces for viola and harp, right? Like, because that's not a very satisfying or compelling program for the audience or for us, right? And so we really thought hard about, like, we wanted it to reflect this really weird time in history that we're all living in, right? And so we spent a lot of time talking about, you know, what kind of music would reflect what we're all going through. At first, what we came up with, we were like, that is a really depressing program because it was all like really sad music. We're like, okay, we can't do that. And so, you know, then we started to think more like big picture about, you know, one of the things I felt when this started is like, all of a sudden I had all this time to like do stuff, right? And that was really nice. And so the first piece I play in the program, actually, the first movement is just really kind of spacious, and it captures that feeling of just like, I felt like I could take like just a big breath and go, oh, you know, even though it was stressful, it was also like nice. And so, you know, I wanted to capture that. And I live right down the street from a park, and there were all these kids always playing in the park that I had never seen before because they finally had time to. And so I wanted to sort of capture that too. So we ended up coming up with a program that kind of reflects this time we're living in, that's not totally depressing, although some of the pieces are depressing, that's fine. But also we wanted our pieces to sort of connect to each other in some way. So there's two pieces by Hindemith, each of which is called Lied, which means song. And it's interesting that there's one for viola and there's one for harp. And so there's that nice connection. And every piece on the program has either some connection to some other piece on the program or a connection to what's sort of going on right now. And so that's sort of how we came up with the program. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, I just decided to learn it in this sort of experimental way.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, because that first one, is that the Amanda Harburg?
The first one I played, yeah, Amanda Harburg's piece. Yeah,
that really lyrical, beautiful, like, that's beautiful. And then the Hindemith is very lyrical as well. Like that movement is just, it's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Most people think of Hindemith as like ugly. I think a lot of people don't like Hindemith that much, like dark, kind of, you know, German. But yeah, this piece is the second movement of one of his solo sonatas, Opus 31, number 4. And I've always loved it. It's really beautiful, but it's also like, it keeps stopping and starting. There's a lot of rests in it. And my sort of overriding image for that piece is just like complete uncertainty, which is exactly what we're living through, right? You think you know what's going on, and then something changes and you're like, wait, what? And that's what that piece kind of captures, because you'll have this beautiful phrase and then it will stop. Mm-hmm. And then you'll have a beautiful phrase and then it will stop. And it's sort of like this feeling that we're all living with, of, you know, this sort of starting and stopping and not knowing, and, you know.
Sort of putting these things out there and not knowing where they land, and what happens.
And the piece, like, it doesn't even really end. I mean, like, it ends, but it's like that's the end? Like, okay.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. So how was that? I mean, it sounds like you and Michelle really worked closely in choosing the program material, but then you play this piece by Piazzolla at the end, and you're in Tucson and she is in Canada. And so what was that process like for you guys to actually put this recording together?
Yeah, so fortunately this piece is pretty straightforward because her part is eighth notes the entire time. She has like no rhythm, basically. It's all eighth notes, and my part is just beautiful and lyrical. So as far as like musical complexity is concerned, it's pretty straightforward, which is really, really good. Mm-hmm. So what we did is, we did several things. So she would record her part, kind of singing how she thought I was going to play my part in her head. Mm-hmm. She would record her part, and then I would play with her recording on headphones to see how it felt. And I would make some notes like, oh, it's a little slow here, or it's a little fast here, or, you know, whatever, or could we be quieter here, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then I would make a recording with it playing out of my external speaker, which meant I couldn't actually hear it that well, and me playing with it. So she could hear how it went together. And I would send her my notes and I would send her that. We tried to rehearse like online. There's platforms now that sort of allow you to rehearse, but they require you to be within 500 miles of each other, most of them, and we're definitely not. We tried WhatsApp video chat, actually. That worked the best, and we were actually able to sort of have a rehearsal that way. I was like standing in my kitchen because that's where my internet's it was like really weird. And it wasn't quite together, but it was sort of together, and it was helpful enough for us to be like, okay. And we did some things where like, I would say, well, it feels like it needs to take a little more time here. And she would play it for me, and I would kind of like imagine my part or something. And I'd be like, oh yeah, that feels better. And so we went back and forth a few times. She would send me a recording, I would play with it, I'd send a recording back, until we finally were like, yeah, okay, this is good. And then she made like the real recording, and she sent that to me. And then I had to make, a video of myself playing it that would go with her video. And we wanted to make it look as much like we were playing together as possible. And so we decided, okay, if this was live, how would we stand? When and where would we look at each other? And so then we recorded it pretending we were looking at each other. And it's hysterical to me to watch it, the two videos put together, because it does actually look like we're communicating.
Yeah. So you're having to act now too. You're having to, like, remember your cues, your theatrical cues and the musical cues as well, right?
Right, exactly. Well, and she recorded her part first, so she definitely couldn't have seen me because I wasn't playing yet. And then when I recorded my part, even though she had sent me a video, I actually found that it was easier to play and stay with her if I was just listening than if I was trying to watch the video, which was surprising to me, actually. You'd think it was easier to like watch somebody and play with them, but for some reason it wasn't. I'm not quite sure why that is. So I was just listening, so I couldn't see her, but I was like, cueing her and stuff like that. And then I would use iMovie to make like a low quality mock-up just to see like, how does this look? And that was really funny too, because there were some times where she would look at me and I would be looking the other way, and it looked like I was really rude.
You're like, I'm ignoring you.
Yeah, and so I had to do a couple takes, one to make sure I was playing the way I wanted to, but also so that I didn't look like, a weird robot that didn't know how to like interact with somebody. So yeah, it was an experience.
Anyone would think that. It sounds like a challenge and a lot of fun too. Is this something, do you feel like now that you've had this experience, do you have more confidence in being able to kind of do more collaborations this way if you need to?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've obviously never recorded a concert in my house before. Like, that's not something that we are trained to do. And, doing this, and when you originally approached us about doing this, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, I'm recording a concert in my living room. Like, is this really gonna like come out okay? But actually, I think it did. And the process was, really difficult and really time consuming because I'd never done it before. But I learned so much, and I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to do it and to learn all this. And, yeah, I have an ongoing collaboration with a good friend of mine who's a pianist who lives practically in Canada. He lives in like super northern Washington. And, how are we going to rehearse? Like, we're not. And so we have actually talked about, figuring out ways to rehearse online. And this experience with Michelle, I've been able to say, okay, he's been really skeptical, like, I don't think so. And, I've been able to say, well, actually, we were able to rehearse in a weird way, but it worked in the end.
It works. Yeah. And it's been so nice to have kind of a few people helping in the background too, with sound and video editing.
Totally.
And stuff. Yeah, that's always a really nice.
Oh yeah. Without Alan and Robert, like, it would have been a disaster. Like, their expertise with the video and the audio, without them, it would not have been good.
Well, I am really thrilled. Like, I'm really thrilled that you guys could do it. I'm thrilled that this came together. And I think we're all exploring these new ways of performing. And, I know for our organization, for presenting concerts, it's like we've had to take our business model and completely change it in the last few months. And so, and that's true for presenters everywhere. So I think we're all kind of just feeling out this new environment where we still want to make music, we still want to present music, people still want to hear and see music. So how do we get all of those things together and do it well? And I think, having seen a little preview of your concert, I'm so excited to see the whole thing, and for our audience to see it, and for it to just be out there in the world. So
yeah, no, me too. It's been really exciting because, like, what's going on right now is really strange and really crazy. And you have to think outside the box, right? You have to rethink everything.
Mhm.
And I think there's some things that people assume, well, that's not going to work. You're going to do a concert in your living room? Like, I don't think so. But actually, it works really well.
You can. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Well, thank you for proving the point. And
Yes. Well, thanks for asking me to prove the point.
yeah, no problem. And I'm sure we will see you again, hopefully live in person once it's safe to do that.
Yes.
And if not, maybe we'll see you in your living room.
That's right. Yes.